quiet morning, a peaceful park, until 5 engines shatter the silence and one man decides enough is enough. You won't believe what happens next. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss stories that hit harder than a punch. The sky over East Los Angeles was still a shade of muted gray when Chuck Norris pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of Echo Park. The air was cool, still clinging to the last traces of night, and the city was only beginning to stir. A few early risers were out, dog walkers, silent joggers, people opening up shops, but for the most part, the world hadn't yet noticed the sun's slow rise. Chuck stepped out of his truck, laced up in plain black running shoes, dressed in a simple navy blue athletic shirt and worn jeans. No fanfare, no cameras, just a man on a mission as usual. At 78, Chuck still moved like a man half his age, every step deliberate, every breath calm. He didn't run for attention. He ran to think, to sharpen, to feel the world beneath his feet. He adjusted his cap and looked around. A jogger in the distance, a young woman moving with steady rhythm, passed under the arch of trees by the far trail. Birds stirred in the branches above. To most people, it was a peaceful morning, but Chuck had lived too many years, seen too many cities, felt too many shifts in the air, and something today was off. The call from Captain Reyes the night before still echoed in his mind. They call themselves Dead Swine L.A., real charming crew. Been moving through neighborhoods like they own the place, harassing people. Women, mostly. Chuck had just nodded. Where were they last seen? Echo Park, Reyes replied. But you didn't hear that from me. Chuck hadn't responded. He didn't need to. The next morning, he was here. He started his run slow, stretching his joints through the opening strides. The gravel shifted underfoot. His breathing was smooth, even. No music, no distractions, just the wind, the crunch of dirt, and the whisper of a city not yet awake. 15 minutes in, he saw her again, the jogger from earlier. Young, early 20s maybe, focused. Her blonde ponytail swung side to side in rhythm with her stride. She didn't glance at him or anyone else. She was lost in her own world, earbuds in, gaze fixed forward. Chuck admired that kind of discipline. He nodded slightly as she passed, even though she didn't see him. He rounded a bend and looped back toward the lake, his senses tuned sharply. Something was humming in the background now. Not birds, not cars. Engines, 5 of them. Low, guttural, and growing louder. Chuck slowed to a walk and stepped off the trail behind a thick patch of brush. From that position, he had a clear view of the incoming threat. The motorcycles tore into the park's entrance, their riders all in leather jackets patched with the same symbol, a snarling boar's skull with blood-red eyes. Their faces were partially covered with bandanas, but the arrogance in their posture was unmistakable. They rode straight onto the grass, ignoring signs, passing too close to park benches and water fountains. People turned to look, then quickly looked away. Others began to leave. Chuck didn't move. His eyes narrowed. He counted them. 5. All heavily built. Tattoos down their arms. The one in the lead had Diesel stenciled in bold white across the back of his jacket. They came to a stop near the trail where the jogger was now approaching. Chuck's stomach tightened. He watched as she slowed, sensing the change in atmosphere but trying to stay calm. She kept running, head down. Diesel made the first move. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out, his voice thick and mocking. "Where you running to so fast?" She didn't respond, kept moving. The second biker laughed. Maybe she needs a ride. They all laughed, loud, crude, sharp, the kind of laughter that cut through silence with the weight of entitlement. Diesel revved his engine, then killed it and stepped off the bike. Chuck moved closer, still hidden. Diesel intercepted her directly, stepping into her path. She skidded to a stop, startled. One earbud popped out. Her eyes widened. Whoa, don't be shy now," Diesel said, raising both hands mockingly. "We just want to talk." "I'm good," she said quickly, trying to step around him. He moved to block her. "Nah, you ain't. Not yet." Then he grabbed her wrist. Chuck saw her eyes flash with panic. "Let go of me," she said. Diesel pulled her closer. "Let's see that smile. Just being friendly." She struggled, tried to yank her arm free. Another biker dismounted and came up behind her. "She's got some fire," he sneered. Then he reached out and slapped the back of her running shorts, laughing. She stumbled forward, tripping onto her knees. Her palms hit the dirt. The group erupted in laughter. "Somebody film this," one of them said. A third biker raised a phone. That was enough. Chuck stepped out from the brush, his pace slow, steady, deliberate. He crossed the grass toward them without a word. "Hey!" Diesel shouted. "Park's closed, old man." Chuck didn't reply. The girl looked up, her lip trembling. Dirt smeared on her knees. Her voice cracked. "Please?" Chuck stopped 10 feet away. His voice was level. "Let her go." The laughter died down, replaced by tension. Diesel turned. "You serious? This ain't your business." Chuck removed his cap, let the wind move through his graying hair. "When you gang up on someone smaller than you, make it public, film it, you make it everyone's business." One of the bikers stepped forward. "You got a death wish, Grandpa?" Chuck looked him in the eyes. "No, but you might." Diesel rolled his shoulders. "Last chance. Walk away." Chuck took one step closer. "I'm not the one who should be walking." The air snapped. Diesel lunged. Chuck sidestepped, grabbed his arm, twisted it backward with bone-cracking force, then shoved him face first into the dirt. The others blinked, then surged forward. But Chuck Norris was already moving. A back fist dropped the one with the phone. A spinning kick hit the third square in the ribs, lifting him off his feet. He hit the ground, wheezing. Another swung a chain. Chuck ducked, countered with a punch that broke the man's nose instantly. The last tried to run. Chuck picked up the fallen chain and threw it with pinpoint precision, wrapping around the man's ankle. He fell hard, skidding in the grass. Silence. All 5 bikers lay groaning, coughing, unconscious, or too stunned to move. Chuck turned to the girl. She was still on her knees, staring in disbelief. He offered his hand. "You're safe now." She took it. People were filming now. Sirens sounded in the distance. Chuck looked at the 5 bodies on the ground and finally spoke again, to no one in particular. "I was just out for a run." The police arrived within 5 minutes. By then, a crowd had already gathered. Some clapped when the squad cars pulled up. Others simply stood still, stunned by what they had just witnessed. The 5 bikers, groaning, bleeding, and humiliated, lay sprawled on the grass near the cracked concrete trail. Chuck stood over them, his arms crossed, saying nothing. The young woman stood beside him now, knees scraped and shaky, but upright. She clung to composure the way a drowning person clings to air. 2 officers jumped out first, weapons half drawn before realizing what they were dealing with. Recognition flashed across the face of one of them. He lowered his weapon and approached with caution and respect. "Mr. Norris?" he asked, incredulous. "You were here when this happened?" Chuck nodded. "I was passing through." The other officer knelt beside one of the bikers, now handcuffed and bleeding from the nose. "Jesus," he muttered. "What the hell did you pass through with? A truck?" Chuck didn't answer. The young woman turned to the officers. "They grabbed me, pulled me down. He—" She pointed to Diesel, who was still semi-conscious and moaning. "He touched me." They all watched, laughed, filmed it. Her voice didn't shake this time. The words came with a force she hadn't known she had. One officer pulled out a notepad, already scribbling. Another patrol car pulled up, this time with a pair of detectives. One of them, a tall, dark-haired woman with a badge clipped to her belt and eyes like sharpened stone, approached Chuck. "We've had reports about this crew for weeks," she said. "Dead Swine L.A., new gang trying to mark territory." Chuck looked her straight in the eye. They picked the wrong park. Later, after the bikers had been loaded into cruisers and driven off, after statements were taken and the crowd dispersed, Chuck remained. The woman, her name was Laura, mid-20s, a local track coach, sat on a bench nearby, ice pack on her knee, her phone in her lap, buzzing nonstop. The video had already spread online. Multiple angles. Dozens of people had caught the confrontation. A stranger's voice played from her phone speaker. "This guy just dropped 5 bikers in 20 seconds. That's Chuck Norris? Holy hell!" She turned to him. "I don't know what to say." "You already said it," Chuck replied, "when you stood up." She smiled faintly, eyes red but proud. "I was afraid." "Being afraid's normal," Chuck said. "Giving in to it, that's a choice. You didn't." They sat in silence. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. The city kept moving. Chuck stood. "You need a ride?" Laura shook her head. "I'll be fine. I have people coming." He nodded and walked away without another word. But the story didn't stop there. By evening, the footage had gone viral. News outlets scrambled to cover the confrontation. Clips looped on every screen. Commentators debated what it meant. Social media exploded. Some called Chuck a hero. Others asked why no one else had stepped in sooner. The answer was simple. Because no one else was Chuck Norris. But not everyone was cheering. At a dimly lit garage miles away, the remaining members of Dead Swine L.A. sat in silence, around a battered table. One of them, taller than the rest, with a jagged scar down his neck and eyes that looked dead even when wide open, watched the video without blinking. He was their leader. His name was Reese, and Diesel had been his cousin. He turned off the screen. "So, he made us look like clowns," Reese said. No one answered. He stood, pulled on his leather jacket, and lit a cigarette. "Then we remind him who we are." Back at his small rented home on the edge of the hills, Chuck stood at his kitchen sink, pouring a glass of water. The news was on, muted. A graphic: "Chuck Norris stops gang attack in L.A. Park." He didn't watch. He didn't need to. He stepped onto his porch, the night air cool against his skin. Somewhere far off, a motorcycle engine revved. Chuck's eyes narrowed. He didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, waiting. The morning sun hadn't yet broken through the haze when Chuck Norris pulled up to the same trail in Echo Park. His boots hit the ground with steady confidence. No rush in his step, only clarity. The police might have made arrests, but Chuck had lived too long and fought too many battles to believe it was over. Cowards rarely acted alone, and rarely gave up after humiliation. He walked the path in silence. The trees whispered above, birds fluttered across the lake, and joggers moved with a cautious distance, some nodding, some whispering. They knew. News of what happened had spread fast, but Chuck didn't want fame or praise. He wanted to make sure no one else was followed, trapped, or hurt in a space that should belong to everyone. By the fountain where it had all happened, he paused. The trail was clean again. The city was trying to forget. He didn't. A low sound came from the distance. Engines? Multiple. He turned slowly. From a side path, 3 bikes emerged, heavy, black, and stripped of license plates. On them were 3 new riders. Chuck didn't recognize their faces, but their cuts bore the same insignia, Dead Swine L.A., and on the back of one, barely visible in white letters, Vengeance. They stopped just off the trail and dismounted. No theatrics this time, just quiet, dangerous intent. "You're a hard man to find," the tallest said. His voice was rough, hollow. Chuck didn't reply. The biker gestured around. "Nice spot. Shame it got bloody." The second one stepped forward. "Diesel's jaw's wired shut. Can't eat solid food for 6 weeks." The third, younger but twitchy, cracked his knuckles. "You made us look weak." Chuck's eyes narrowed. "You did that yourselves." There was a beat of silence. The leader, Reese, tilted his head. "You know who we are?" "I know what you are," Chuck replied. "You hunt in packs. You pick victims. You hide behind fear." Reese grinned without humor. "You talk like the world's still got rules. It doesn't." Chuck nodded slowly. "It does. You just forgot them." Reese lunged first. He wasn't small and he wasn't untrained. But Chuck sidestepped cleanly, caught the wrist mid-swing, and turned his own momentum against him. Reese hit the dirt shoulder first, gasping. The second came in swinging with a tire iron. Chuck ducked, drove a fist into his gut, then his throat. The man crumpled before he could scream. The third hesitated. Chuck stared at him. "Walk away." The young biker trembled but charged anyway, swinging wild. Chuck let him come. Caught the swing, pivoted, and used his own weight to throw him across the trail. He landed on his side, groaning. Reese pulled a switchblade from his boot and scrambled to his feet. Chuck's eyes never left the blade. "You want to escalate?" he said. "Go ahead. But remember, this ends one of 2 ways. You leave, or you don't get up." Reese lunged, screaming. Chuck kicked low, precise, disarming him instantly. The knife flew into the grass. Reese swung again. Chuck blocked with one forearm, countered with a strike that split the skin above the eye. Blood streamed down Reese's face. The others stayed down, barely moving. Chuck grabbed Reese by the collar and slammed him into the park fence. "This is your only warning. You or anyone from Dead Swine come near another woman in this city, anyone who can't fight back, and I will finish what I started, and there won't be cameras next time." Reese spat blood. "You think you're a hero?" Chuck leaned closer. "No, I think I'm what happens when heroes don't show up." Police sirens again. Chuck stepped back. Let them hear what he'd done. As the officers arrived, Chuck raised his hands calmly. Witnesses confirmed the story. The 3 bikers were cuffed, bruised, one of them barely conscious. Reese was still snarling but said nothing. A female officer approached Chuck. "You all right?" He nodded. "They came looking for revenge. They found something else." That night, a news anchor's voice played across TV sets across the city. Another confrontation involving martial arts legend Chuck Norris took place today in Echo Park, where remnants of the biker gang Dead Swine L.A. reportedly sought retribution. They were hospitalized with moderate to severe injuries. No charges filed against Norris, who acted in defense of public safety. In a bar across town, men in leather watched the screen in silence. In his truck, Chuck turned off the radio. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. No celebration, no smile, just resolve. They weren't finished, but neither was he. The sun was beginning to set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and red as Chuck Norris stepped out of a local grocery store with a paper bag in one arm. Life around him moved at its usual pace. Cars honked, kids played on sidewalks, shopkeepers closed for the evening, but in his mind, something was shifting. He had been in plenty of fights before, more than he could count, but this one didn't feel like a passing storm. It felt like the beginning of something more deliberate, more targeted. As he approached his truck, he noticed it immediately. Taped to the driver's side mirror was a photo, one taken from across the street, zoomed in, grainy but clear enough. It was Chuck, seated outside his home, the timestamp marked from 2 nights earlier. Someone had been watching. There was no note, no words, no symbol, just the image and the silence behind it. Chuck didn't show reaction. He folded the photo once and slid it into the pocket of his flannel shirt. Then he climbed into the truck and drove home, calm as ever. But his eyes scanned every corner, every alley, every pair of headlights that stayed behind him too long. By the time he reached his cabin on the edge of the hills, darkness had crept in. He parked at the side and left the lights off. Inside, he checked every window, every lock. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. They weren't going to stop. Across the city, the remnants of Dead Swine LA were gathering. Their numbers had dwindled. Too many had been arrested, hospitalized, or scared off. But those who remained were more dangerous now, less concerned with reputation, more driven by revenge. They saw Chuck not just as an enemy, but as a symbol of something deeper, resistance to their dominance. Their fear turned to anger. That anger needed a target. Reese, stitched up and bruised from their last encounter, sat at a table in a dark bar surrounded by silence. A few remaining loyalists leaned in as he laid out a plan. "We tried public," he said, voice low and bitter. "Didn't work. He wants to play shadow games? Fine. We take it to his doorstep. We end it. Quiet. Final." They all nodded. No phones, no names, just intent. Chuck's instincts kept him on edge for the next 2 days. He avoided routines, no early runs, no obvious patterns. But he didn't hide either. If they were watching, he made sure they saw him watching back. On the 3rd morning, he drove to the youth center downtown where Lara had been training local girls in self-defense. She was leading a small workshop when he arrived. Her face lit up when she saw him. Since the attack, she'd been different. Sharper, more focused, less afraid. Chuck had given her more than protection. He'd given her fire. "You checking in on me?" she asked, drying sweat from her brow. "Making sure the right people are still standing," Chuck replied. She nodded. "We are, thanks to you." He scanned the room. 10 girls, ages 12 to 17, practicing stance and breath control. It wasn't martial arts, not yet, but it was a start. Before leaving, he pulled Lara aside. "Lock your doors tonight, and if anything feels off, don't wait. Call someone." Her smile faded, but she didn't argue. "Is it them?" Chuck didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, just after 11 p.m., the first sound came, a soft crack from the tree line behind Chuck's cabin. Then another, not loud enough to panic a neighbor, but distinct, deliberate. He was already up, dressed, seated in the dark. He reached under the couch and retrieved a pair of lightweight batons. No guns, not yet. Outside, the trees were quiet. The moon was high. He stepped onto the porch without making a sound. Movement. To the left, shadows broke off from the woods. 3 figures, then a 4th. Faces covered, tools in hand. Not weapons of efficiency, weapons of intimidation. Chains, a crowbar, a baseball bat with nails. They didn't expect him to meet them. Chuck didn't wait. He moved. The first man barely saw him coming before a baton cracked across his wrist, disarming him. The second tried to swing the crowbar, but Chuck ducked, stepped inside, and broke his nose with the handle of the second baton. The third grabbed Chuck from behind, locking his arms, but he drove his heel backward, crushing the attacker's shin, then flipped him hard over the railing. Reese stepped out of the shadows last. "You can't stop all of us," he hissed. Chuck stared at him. "I don't have to, just you." Reese rushed with the bat. Chuck blocked the swing with both forearms, letting the momentum carry through, then struck upward into his ribs. The bat fell. Chuck kicked it into the dark. The fight turned savage. Knees, elbows, fists, raw power against brute force. Reese landed a punch. Chuck returned 3. Reese stumbled. Chuck stepped forward, struck him in the throat, then swept his legs. Reese landed hard on his back, gasping for air, staring at the stars above. Chuck stood over him, breathing heavy but steady. "You picked the wrong man," he said. Police arrived minutes later, called in by a motion sensor trip that Chuck had silently installed around his property weeks ago. They arrested the 4 without resistance. 2 needed stretchers. None spoke. The officer who led the team looked at Chuck. "Same crew?" Chuck nodded. "Last of them, I think." As the cruisers pulled away, Chuck walked back inside. No damage, no blood on his porch, just silence again. The following day, reporters tried to contact him. He didn't respond. Laura called to say thank you. He told her to keep training. That evening, Chuck sat on his porch with a mug of black coffee as the wind stirred the trees. He looked out into the dark, calm. Let them come. The city buzzed as usual, but something in the air had shifted. News of the failed assault on Chuck Norris's home spread through local channels before the sun had even risen. 4 members of Dead Swan LA were in custody, 3 hospitalized. The report mentioned no shots fired, no weapons used by the homeowner, just one man neutralizing multiple armed intruders with non-lethal force. Social media exploded again. People called him invincible. Others called him a myth, but Chuck didn't care for any of it. He wasn't interested in fame, only in peace, and peace was never free. That morning, he returned to Echo Park one last time. The trail was quiet like it had been the day before it all began. The gravel crunched beneath his boots. He walked slowly now, not from age or fatigue, but from awareness. He'd fought enough battles to know when a chapter had closed. This one was nearly there, but not fully. At the far end of the lake, near a bench that overlooked the water, someone waited. Not a biker, not a reporter, just a man in a worn denim jacket, arms crossed. Chuck approached him, cautiously but unshaken. "You're the reason this started," the man said. His voice was calm but tense. "My brother was one of them. Diesel." Chuck didn't respond immediately. He watched the man's hands, empty, steady, but grief made people dangerous in ways weapons couldn't. "I'm not here to fight," the man continued. "I came to say something." Chuck nodded once, waiting. "He was a bastard. Always was. But I didn't want him dead. Now he's barely walking, half his face wired shut, and all people remember is a clip of him getting humiliated." Chuck's expression didn't change. "He picked the fight," Chuck said, "not just with me, with the world, with anyone smaller than him." The man looked away, jaw tight. "I know," he admitted. "He was cruel. I just wanted to hear it from you, that he had a choice." Chuck looked out over the lake. They always have a choice. He made his. The man stood silent for a few moments. Then he turned to leave. "Don't stop doing what you do," he said over his shoulder, "even if it's not for guys like him." Chuck didn't answer. Later that day, Laura called. The youth center was hosting a city-sponsored safety event. Hundreds were expected. She asked if he could stop by. Not to teach, not to speak, just to be there. Chuck agreed. By afternoon, the stadium was alive with energy. Girls in groups ran drills on mats. Instructors gave commands. Parents watched from the sidelines, some still skeptical, others transformed. Chuck arrived quietly. No entourage, no security. He stood near the far end of the lot, watching as a girl no older than 14 broke free from a wrist hold and delivered a flawless takedown. Cheers erupted around her. Her smile was bright, but behind it was fire. Lara approached Chuck and handed him a bottle of water. "They keep asking if you'll teach," she said with a smirk. "I already did," Chuck replied. As the event wrapped up, a group of reporters lingered near the exit. One tried to approach, camera in hand. "Mr. Norris, any comment about the attacks? About the gang?" Chuck paused, then looked directly into the lens. "If you see someone being hurt and you do nothing, you're part of the problem. This world doesn't need more watchers. It needs people willing to stand." That was all he said. By the time the segment aired that evening, it had already been clipped, shared, and quoted. It wasn't showmanship, it was truth. That night, Chuck returned home. The wind was calm, the sky clear. On his porch sat a box. No address, just his name handwritten across the top. He opened it slowly. Inside was a folded patch, Dead Swan, L.A., cut clean through the center with a blade. Beneath it, a single message: "We're done." Chuck stared at it for a long moment, then folded the note and set it aside. He lit a match and tossed the patch into a small metal barrel nearby. It caught quickly and turned to ash. He watched the flames die out, then turned and walked inside.